On Thanksgiving dinner, my son-in-law boasted triumphantly, "Now I'm in charge of this house. Your accounts are frozen for your own safety." Everyone applauded like idiots, celebrating my defeat. I leaned toward my daughter and whispered, "Girl, are you really blind to all this?" She instantly turned white as a ghost, covered in sweat. He barked, "Blind to what?" They didn't even realize what hit them. But this old IRS auditor had already started her game, and the son-in-law's betrayal won't go unpunished. Before listening to this story, we have an important announcement for you. Unfortunately, we are discontinuing this channel, and it will be deleted soon. If you want to continue listening to new stories, subscribe to our new channel, Cold Revenge. The link to it will be in the collaboration with this video, in the description of this video, and in the comments. Thank you for your attention. My name is Barbara Mitchell. I'm 68 years old, living in Phoenix, Arizona, in a house I paid off 23 years ago. Spent 3 decades as a senior auditor for the IRS, catching people who thought they were smarter than the system. Retired in 2019, thinking I'd finally have peace. Turns out the most sophisticated fraud I'd ever encounter was happening right under my own roof. Let me tell you about my daughter Jennifer. She wasn't always the woman who can't meet my eyes across the dinner table. I remember teaching her to ride a bike in our backyard, her little hands gripping the handlebars. "Don't let go, Mom," she'd yell. I never did. Not until she was ready. Jennifer is 42 now. Works as a mid-level manager at a logistics company. Decent job, decent salary. But somewhere along the way, my girl lost her spine. I watched it happen slowly, like rust eating through metal. It started 4 years ago when she brought Marcus home. Marcus Price. Now Marcus Mitchell. He's 38, with the kind of smile that makes you check your wallet afterward. When Jennifer first introduced him, he was all charm. "Mrs. Mitchell, your home is beautiful. Jennifer talks about you constantly." He squeezed my hand with both of his. His eyes never blinked. I've interviewed hundreds of people during my career. Embezzlers, tax evaders, fraudsters. They all have one thing in common. They oversell. Too friendly, too eager. Marcus checked every box. But Jennifer was smitten. And what was I supposed to say? They married 18 months later. 3 years ago, after my husband passed, the house felt too empty. When Jennifer suggested she and Marcus move in to keep me company, I agreed. Thought it might be nice. Thought wrong. The changes came gradually, so subtle I almost missed them. First small things. "Mom, it would be easier if I handled the utility bills. You know, one less thing for you to worry about." That was Marcus 6 months after moving in. His voice was honey sweet. "Then we should consolidate the accounts for simplicity. Jennifer and I can manage all the paperwork, and you shouldn't bother yourself with these financial details at your age. Let us handle everything." At my age, I was 65. I'd spent 30 years untangling the most complex financial schemes the IRS had ever seen. But sure, paying an electric bill was apparently beyond me now. I noticed other things, too. Conversations that stopped dead when I entered a room. Documents left on the kitchen counter that vanished before I could examine them. My mail arriving already opened. "Oh, I thought it was junk mail." "Sorry," Marcus would say with that sweet apologetic smile. He calls himself a financial consultant. No license, no credentials, just a few private clients he advises on their investments. I looked him up once, found nothing. No certifications, no professional history, no LinkedIn profile. Just a man who was very, very good at making people trust him. His older brother Raymond visits often, 64 years old, with a voice like a cheese grater and opinions on everything. Together, they'd sit in my living room, whispering and glancing my way like I was furniture that hadn't been moved in too long. I kept mental notes, old habit from my auditing days. Every suspicious interaction, every odd comment, every number that didn't quite add up. I wrote nothing down. Too risky with them watching. but I remembered everything. Then came Thanksgiving. The dining room was full. Raymond and his husband, some friends. Everyone gathered around a table loaded with food. My turkey, my home. Marcus had arranged everything, seating himself at the head of the table, my spot. But I said nothing. The wine flowed. Laughter filled the room. I watched my daughter, who was drinking faster than usual, avoiding my gaze like it might burn her. Then Marcus stood up, crystal glass in hand, tapping it with a fork. Everyone, I have wonderful news to share. The room quieted. He smiled, that perfect practiced smile, and looked directly at me. As of this week, I'm officially managing all of this household's finances. Mom's accounts have been frozen for her own safety and security. She agreed it would be best this way. I just want everyone to know that we're taking care of her. He raised his glass. To family. They applauded. Every single person at that table clapped like trained seals. Raymond beamed with pride. Jennifer stared at her plate, her fork motionless. I didn't applaud. I sat perfectly still, watching my son-in-law bask in his moment of triumph. Frozen. My accounts were frozen for my safety. The thing about working for the IRS is that you learn to control your face. I've sat across from men and women who stole millions, smiled at them, made small talk, all while building a case that would put them away for years. So I smiled now, nodded slightly, played the confused old woman they expected me to be. But inside something cold and sharp was taking shape. Not anger. Anger makes you stupid. This was recognition. I knew exactly what was happening. After dinner, while everyone mingled in the living room, I noticed a document on the side table near the entrance. Legal-looking, official power of attorney, my name, my address, my signature, except I had never signed it. I'd never even seen this document before. I looked up slowly. Jennifer was watching me from across the room, her face pale as chalk, her hands shoved deep in her pockets. When our eyes met, she looked away immediately. My daughter knew. She knew what her husband was doing, and she said nothing. I set the document down carefully, exactly where I'd found it. Walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the window, looking out at the backyard where I'd taught my daughter to ride a bike. He thought he was dealing with a helpless old woman. He had no idea what he'd just started. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in my head. 3 years of consolidated accounts. 3 years of documents I'd signed without reading carefully enough or hadn't signed at all. 3 years of Marcus's sweet smile and helpful suggestions. How much had he taken? How deep did this go? The next morning, I waited until the house was quiet. Jennifer had left for work early, avoiding breakfast with me. Marcus was in the master bedroom, my former master bedroom, the one I'd shared with my husband for 35 years, doing whatever he did all day. I walked down to the basement. Old houses have secrets. Mine has a safe behind a false panel in the workshop area, hidden behind my workbench, where I restore antique clocks. It's a hobby that requires patience and precision. You can't rush a 100-year-old mechanism. Also, it means I spend hours alone in the basement and nobody thinks twice about it. I'd installed that safe 20 years ago. Inside, copies of every important document I'd ever signed, birth certificates, property deeds, tax records, and signature samples spanning decades. Old auditor's paranoia, maybe. But paranoia is just pattern recognition that hasn't been proven right yet. I pulled out my signature samples and compared them to a photograph I'd taken of that power of attorney document. The forgery was good, very good, but the M was wrong. My M has a distinctive backward lean, a quirk from my 20s. This M stood straight up, textbook perfect. Nobody forges a signature by making it too neat. But Marcus didn't know that. I photographed everything, saved images to a secure cloud account he didn't know existed. Then I put everything back exactly as it was. I remembered the day Marcus moved in 3 years ago. He'd arrived with Jennifer carrying boxes. I was in the living room with my husband's piano. We'd kept it even though neither of us played. "Oh, that's beautiful," Marcus had said, running his fingers along the ivory keys. "Do you play, Barbara?" "No, my husband was going to learn." "How sweet. You know, I took lessons as a boy. Maybe I could play for you sometime." He never did. Within 6 months, the piano was in the garage. Within a year, he suggested selling it. I refused. His face when I said no, just for a moment before the mask slipped back into place. I should have paid more attention to that look. Cold, calculating, the look of someone recalculating an equation after getting an unexpected variable. Around noon, Marcus appeared in the kitchen where I was making a sandwich. "Good morning, Mom." He was chipper, radiant, as if last night's announcement was perfectly normal. "How are you feeling today?" "Sleep well." "Fine, thank you." "Good, good. Can I make you some tea?" "You look a little tired." "I'm fine." He studied me for a moment, his head tilted slightly, like a bird examining a worm. "You know what I said last night about managing things? It really is for the best. Jennifer and I just want to make sure you're not stressed about finances. You've earned a rest." I smiled at him. The same smile I'd given to a woman who embezzled $4 million from a children's hospital. "That's very thoughtful, Marcus." "We're family," he said. "That's what family does." Family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I nodded and took my sandwich upstairs, locked the door. Then I opened my laptop and began searching. Elder financial abuse attorney, Phoenix, Arizona Adult Protection Act lawyer, financial exploitation, elderly adults, legal help. The results were illuminating. Arizona takes elder abuse seriously. Financial exploitation of adults over 65 is a felony. Forgery is a Class 4 felony, carrying up to 3 years in prison. If I could prove what he'd done, Marcus wouldn't just lose access to my accounts. He'd lose his freedom. I found her on page 2. Patricia Reynolds, attorney at law, specialized in elder abuse. 200 reviews. 4.8 stars. Not a single lost case of this type in 5 years. I scheduled a consultation for the following week using a library computer and a credit card Marcus didn't know about. That evening, I heard Raymond's voice from downstairs. He was on the phone, his grating tone carrying through the old house's thin walls. "Honestly, it's getting worse. Poor Barbara forgot what day it was yesterday. Asked me twice if it was Sunday. Jennifer is worried about her. Naturally. We all are. It might be time to discuss options, you know, for her own good." I hadn't forgotten anything. I'd asked him about Sunday because that's when he'd said he was leaving, and I was hoping it was true. But there it was, the groundwork being laid, the narrative being constructed, confused old Barbara, forgetting things, needing supervision, needing someone to manage her affairs. They weren't just stealing from me. They were building a case to declare me incompetent. I sat surrounded by antique clocks I'd restored over the years. Each one a puzzle I'd solved. Patience and precision. Find the broken gear, fix it. This wasn't so different, just a more dangerous mechanism. I thought about Jennifer, my daughter who couldn't meet my eyes, who drank too much at dinner, who let her husband stand up in my house and announce he'd taken control of my life. When did I lose her? The questions wouldn't help me now. What's done is done. What matters is what comes next. Later that night, I went to empty the hallway trash can. At the bottom, under crumpled tissues, an envelope from Desert Community Bank, addressed to me, already opened. They were intercepting my mail now. I stood there in the dim hallway, holding that torn envelope, and felt something shift inside me. The last traces of doubt disappeared. This was war, and Marcus had no idea he'd just declared it on someone who'd spent 30 years learning exactly how to win. The consultation with Patricia Reynolds was scheduled for the following week. Getting there without Marcus knowing would be the first test. I'd been watching him more carefully since Thanksgiving. Once you know someone's a predator, you start noticing the small tells, the micro expressions, the calculated pauses, the way his eyes tracked valuable objects in rooms like a cat tracking mice. The morning of my appointment, I announced at breakfast that I was going to the library. The library. Marcus looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised. What for? Research. I've been thinking about writing my memoirs. 30 years at the IRS. There are stories I could tell. I took a sip of coffee. Probably boring to most people, but it keeps an old woman's mind sharp. He smiled, but I caught the flicker of annoyance. Another unexpected variable in his equation. That's nice, Mom. Jennifer, isn't that nice? Jennifer grunted something into her cereal bowl. She'd barely looked at me since Thanksgiving. I walked to the library, 3 blocks, then ordered an Uber from there. Patricia Reynolds's office was downtown on Central Avenue in one of those glass towers that house lawyers, accountants, and other professionals who make their living untangling other people's messes. Reynolds was younger than I expected, 52 maybe, dark suit, firm handshake, eyes that assessed me quickly and efficiently. Her office walls were covered with framed certificates and a few newspaper clippings about cases she'd won. Mrs. Mitchell, please sit down. You mentioned elder financial abuse on the phone. I sat, pulled out my phone, showed her the photographs of the power of attorney. This document appeared at my Thanksgiving dinner. My son-in-law announced to a room full of guests that he now controls my finances. That's my name on this paper. That's supposedly my signature. I paused. I never signed it. Reynolds studied the image, zooming in on the signature. You're certain? I was a senior auditor for the IRS for 30 years. I've examined thousands of signatures. This one's a forgery. Good, but not good enough. Look at the M. She looked. Then she looked at me with new interest. The M leans wrong, she said slowly. Yours tilts backward. Exactly. Whoever forged this used the textbook example of the letter. They didn't know about my quirk. Reynolds set down the phone. Mrs. Mitchell, if this is what you say it is, we're looking at felony forgery in Arizona. That's a Class 4 felony up to 3 years. If he's been using this document to access your finances, that's financial exploitation of an elderly adult. Also a felony. I suspected as much, but I have to be honest with you. Suspicion isn't proof. We need documentation. Bank records, transaction histories, a forensic analysis of the signature by a certified expert. She leaned back. Do you have access to your financial records? He's intercepting my mail, but I have other resources. I told her about the safe, the copies I'd kept, the photographs stored in the cloud. Reynolds nodded slowly. You're not what I expected, Mrs. Mitchell. Most people underestimate old women. It's a useful quality. She almost smiled. I'm going to recommend someone. A private investigator named David Chen. He specializes in financial fraud cases. Discreet, thorough, and he knows how to gather evidence that holds up in court. She wrote a name and number on a card. In the meantime, don't confront them. Don't let them know you suspect anything. Can you do that? I've been playing a role for 3 years without knowing it. Playing one intentionally shouldn't be any harder. I paid her $2,500 cash. Money from the emergency fund in my safe that Marcus didn't know existed. She didn't ask where it came from. Professional discretion. The Uber ride back cost $34. I had the driver drop me 2 blocks from home so I could approach on foot as if I'd walked from the library. Marcus was waiting in the living room when I came through the door. How was the library? Educational. I hung up my coat. Found some interesting material on memoir structure. Did you know most successful memoirs start with a dramatic incident? Something that hooks the reader. Fascinating. He was watching me too closely. You were gone a long time. Old women walk slowly, and the library had comfortable chairs. I started toward the stairs. I think I'll rest before dinner. Mom. I turned. He was holding something. A small slip of paper. I was doing laundry earlier. Found this in your jacket pocket. He held it up. An Uber receipt. $34 is a long way from the library. The air in the room changed. I could feel him calculating, reassessing, trying to figure out what move I'd made that he hadn't anticipated. I kept my face pleasant, mildly confused. The befuddled old woman he expected. Uber. I don't know what that is. Must be from before. Maybe Jennifer left something in my pocket. This jacket is yours, Mom. I recognize it. Then I don't know. These things happen when you're my age. I shrugged and turned back toward the stairs. Memory isn't what it used to be. I felt his eyes on my back all the way up. He wasn't sure. Not yet. But the first crack had appeared in his perfect plan. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas passed in a strange suspended tension. On the surface, nothing had changed. Marcus still smiled his sweet smile. Jennifer still avoided my eyes. Raymond still called weekly to check on poor Barbara's memory, but underneath everything was shifting. I'd hired David Chen the day after meeting Reynolds. He was 34, sharp-featured, with the kind of direct gaze that made you want to tell the truth, whether you meant to or not. We met at a diner across town. Neutral territory, no paper trail. I need you to find out everything about Marcus Mitchell, I told him. Maiden name Price. Claims to be a financial consultant. What kind of everything? Professional history, client list, any complaints, lawsuits, or criminal investigations. I want to know everyone he's worked with and what happened to them. Chin wrote nothing down, just listened, nodded, and named his fee. I paid him $1,500 as a retainer. Mrs. Mitchell, he said before we parted. In my experience, people who steal from family usually have practice. If he's doing this to you, you're probably not the first. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Meanwhile, I played my part, the confused, compliant mother-in-law who shuffled around her own house like a guest. Every morning, Marcus would check on me with that sickening voice. Sleep well, Mom. Need anything? Every evening, I'd retreat to my room early, claiming fatigue. What he didn't know was that I was watching, cataloging, building a case in my head. I noticed how he always positioned himself between me and the mailbox, how he'd suddenly appear whenever I was near the computer, how he'd steered Jennifer away from private conversations with me. Christmas arrived with all its false cheer. Marcus had decorated the house, my house, with expensive ornaments and a tree that must have cost $300. Paid for with my money, no doubt. He'd invited Raymond and a few of their friends for dinner, recreating the Thanksgiving dynamic. The gifts under the tree were wrapped in gold paper. When we opened them, I received practical items. Socks, a sweater, a book about staying mentally active in your golden years. Subtle. Marcus received jewelry. Jennifer got new golf clubs. I did the math. The jewelry alone was probably $2,000. Money he'd taken from me transformed into a gift for himself. There was an elegant irony there if you had the stomach for it. After dinner, I watched Jennifer. She was drinking again, not falling down drunk, but steadily, methodically, the way a person drinks when they're trying to drown something. Her hands shook slightly when she poured. She laughed too loudly at Marcus's jokes, agreed too quickly with his opinions. My daughter was afraid of her own husband. When the guests finally left and Raymond had gone to the guest room, I found Jennifer alone in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. I approached quietly, stood beside her. Sweetheart. She flinched. Actually flinched like I'd raised a hand to her. Mom, I didn't hear you come in. Jennifer. I leaned closer, lowered my voice to barely a whisper. Tell me something. Are you truly blind to all of this? She went white, not pale. White like someone had drained the blood from her face. Sweat broke out on her forehead. Her hands stopped moving. Blind to what? The words came out strangled. Before I could answer, Marcus's voice cut through from the doorway. Blind to what? He stood there, dish towel in hand, eyes sharp as broken glass. He'd been listening. Of course, he'd been listening. I turned to face him, smiled, my gentle old woman smile. To what a wonderful evening this was, Marcus. The food, the company, the decorations. You really outdid yourself. It's been years since this house felt so festive. He didn't buy it. I could see the suspicion crystallizing behind his eyes, but he couldn't call me out without revealing his own paranoia. Well, he said slowly, we try to make things special. Family is what matters. Indeed, it is. Jennifer had resumed loading the dishwasher, her movements mechanical, her face still ashen. She knew something was happening. She just didn't know what. I excused myself and went to my room. On my phone, secure in my locked bedroom, I found an email from David Chen. The first report. I read it 3 times. Marcus Price had no license as a financial consultant. He'd never had one. He'd advised at least 3 elderly clients over the past decade, all widowers or widows, all with significant assets, all of whom had filed complaints that were later withdrawn or dismissed for insufficient evidence. The third client's name jumped out at me. Dorothy Hayes, 78 years old, widow, died 6 months after Marcus began managing her finances. Cause of death, heart failure. Her estate had been nearly depleted by the time of her death. I set down the phone. He wasn't just a thief. He was a predator, a professional, and I was his latest target. The question was no longer whether to fight back. The question was how to make sure he never did this to anyone again. The new year arrived without celebration. Marcus had organized a small gathering, just him, Jennifer, Raymond, and myself, and we'd watch the ball drop on television while drinking champagne that cost $60 a bottle. My money, naturally. I toasted to new beginnings and watched Marcus's eyes narrow slightly. He was still trying to figure out what I knew, what I was planning. The uncertainty was eating at him, making him sloppy. Good. A week into the new year, David Chen sent his second report. This one was more detailed and more damning than I'd expected. He'd obtained copies of my bank statements through methods I didn't ask about. Some things are better left unquestioned when you're building a case. The numbers told a clear story. Over the past 18 months, $47,300 had disappeared from my accounts. The breakdown was almost artistic in its audacity. $12,000 for kitchen renovation. I looked at my kitchen every morning. Same cabinets, same countertops, same flooring as when my husband and I installed them 15 years ago. Not a single nail had been hammered. $8,500 for medical expenses. My health insurance covered everything. I hadn't paid a medical bill out of pocket in years. Every doctor visit, every prescription, every checkup covered. $15,800 in direct transfers to an account registered to Marcus Mitchell. Financial management fees, the memo lines read. For managing money he was simultaneously stealing. $11,000 in cash withdrawals. No explanation needed. Cash is untraceable. That's why criminals love it. I sat in my basement workshop, surrounded by the quiet ticking of restored clocks, and read the numbers again. $47,300. Enough to buy a new car. Enough for someone's college tuition. Enough to live on for a year if you were careful. Gone. Taken by a man who smiled at me every morning and asked if I'd slept well. The rage I felt was cold and focused, not the heart-blinding kind that makes you do stupid things. This was the rage of an auditor who'd found fraud. Methodical, patient, building toward a reckoning. But Marcus wasn't standing still either. 2 weeks later, a man appeared at our door. Professional attire, clipboard, friendly but assessing smile. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Kevin Torres from Adult Protective Services. I'm here to conduct a welfare assessment. Marcus appeared behind me, his face a portrait of concern. Kevin, thank you so much for coming. We've been so worried about Mom lately. I let them in. Let Kevin sit me down in my own living room while Raymond, who'd arrived coincidentally that morning, hovered nearby, shaking his head sadly and making little tooting sounds. Mrs. Mitchell, Kevin began, your family has expressed concerns about your cognitive state, specifically memory issues, confusion about dates and times, difficulty managing daily tasks. I looked at Marcus. He had arranged his features into an expression of loving worry. It was masterful, really. Academy Award material. I see, I said. And what would you like to know? For the next hour, Kevin asked questions. What day was it? Who was the current president? Could I count backward from 100 by sevens? Did I know my address, my social security number, the names of my relatives? I answered every question correctly. I recited my medication list, which Marcus had been managing, from memory, including dosages and timing. I described my daily routine in detail. I solved a simple logic puzzle he presented without hesitation. When he asked about my career, I told him, 30 years with the IRS, senior auditor, hundreds of cases involving financial fraud and tax evasion. Kevin's pen paused over his clipboard. He looked at Marcus with a different expression now, more skeptical, more questioning. Mrs. Mitchell, he said carefully, based on this assessment, I find you to be fully mentally competent, clear cognition, excellent memory, no signs of confusion or disorientation. Marcus's smile froze in place. Just for a moment, barely a flicker, but I caught it. The rage behind his eyes quickly smothered. That's wonderful news, he said, voice tight. We were just so worried. Better safe than sorry, right? After Kevin left, Marcus disappeared into the master bedroom and didn't emerge for hours. I could hear his voice through the walls. On the phone with his lawyer, probably, or his brother, trying to figure out his next move. The following week, I met with Reynolds at her office. She'd received Chen's full report. Mrs. Mitchell, we have enough for a civil lawsuit, financial exploitation, breach of fiduciary duty, fraud. We can file tomorrow if you want, and criminal charges. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. That's trickier. For the district attorney to take this seriously, we need documented evidence of ongoing criminal activity, something they can't dismiss as a family dispute. She paused. What we have proves he took your money. What we need is proof he's still trying. I understood. The past wasn't enough. We needed him to show his true colors in real time, on camera, on paper, in a way that couldn't be denied. I think I said slowly, I have an idea. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. The best ones always are. 2 weeks after my meeting with Reynolds, I opened a new bank account at Southwest Federal Credit Union, different from Desert Community Bank, where Marcus had established his control. I deposited $3,000 drawn from cash I'd kept hidden in my basement safe for exactly this kind of emergency. Then I did something careless, something an old woman with failing memory might do. I left the account statement on the kitchen counter just for a few minutes, just long enough for Marcus to walk through on his way to the laundry room. I watched from the doorway, pretending to be absorbed in the newspaper as his eyes caught the paper, watched them widen slightly as he read the bank's name, the account number, the balance, $3,000, sitting in an account he hadn't known about, money that wasn't under his control. He didn't say anything, just walked past, collected his laundry basket, and continued on like nothing had happened. But I saw his hands tighten on the basket's handles until his knuckles went white. Saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. For someone like Marcus, that was intolerable. An asset he didn't control was an asset he couldn't steal. I went back to my routine, puttering in the basement with my clocks, pretending to nap in my chair, shuffling around the house like the harmless old woman he believed me to be. And I waited. Exactly 8 days later, I received a letter from Southwest Federal Credit Union. Dear Mrs. Mitchell, it read, we are writing to inform you of an attempted unauthorized access to your account. An individual identifying themselves as your representative attempted to obtain information about your account using documentation that could not be verified. Per our security protocols, no information was released, and this incident has been logged. Please contact our fraud department at your earliest convenience. I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat back in my chair and smiled. He'd taken the bait. Walked right into the trap like a hungry fish snapping at a worm. Tried to access an account he had no right to, using forged documents that didn't pass the bank's verification. And now there was a documented record of it. A federal offense, bank fraud, identity theft, the kind of evidence that makes prosecutors sit up and pay attention. I drove to Reynolds's office that afternoon, taking an Uber from the library as usual. Handed her the letter without a word. She read it. Then she looked up at me with something close to admiration. Mrs. Mitchell, did you plan this? I may have anticipated certain behaviors. She shook her head slowly. This is federal bank fraud, attempted identity theft combined with the state charges for financial exploitation and forgery. He's looking at serious prison time. How serious? If we present all of this together, 10 to 15 years, depending on the judge and how much additional evidence surfaces. And Mrs. Mitchell, in my experience, people like him always have more victims. I nodded. The number didn't bring me joy, but it brought something close to satisfaction. Justice isn't always pleasant, but it's necessary. That evening, I met Jennifer at a coffee shop across town. She'd sent me a text that morning. "Mom, can we talk alone, please?" And I'd agreed, despite my reservations. She looked terrible, bags under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks, hands shaking slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. She'd lost weight since Christmas, her clothes hanging loose on her frame. "Mom," her voice cracked. "I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." I knew. She couldn't meet my eyes about some of it. Marcus said he was just optimizing things, making sure your money was being managed properly for your benefit. He said you'd agreed to it, that you just didn't remember because of your age. And you believed him. I wanted to. Her voice was barely a whisper. It was easier to believe him than to think my husband was. She trailed off, unable to say the word. "Stealing from your mother?" She flinched like I'd struck her across the face. I didn't know how much. "I swear to you, Mom." I didn't know about the amounts or the forged signature or any of the specific details, but I knew something wasn't right, and I didn't ask questions because I was afraid of the answers. Because asking would have meant admitting my marriage was a lie. I studied my daughter, the girl who'd gripped my hand so tightly learning to ride a bike. The woman who'd let her husband take control of her life, her decisions, her spine. Jennifer, what you did, what you allowed to happen, I'm not sure I can forgive it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes and spilling down her cheeks. But you're here now. That counts for something. I leaned forward. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I'm scared of him, Mom. You don't know what he's like when he's angry. The things he says, the way he looks at me. Oh, I think I'm about to find out. I paused. He's planning something for my birthday, isn't he? Jennifer went pale, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. How did you know? Because that's what predators do. They escalate. They push for more when they feel their control slipping. I held her gaze until she looked away. Tell me what he's planning. She swallowed hard. A trust document. Something that would transfer the house to him and me after you. After you pass. He says it's just estate planning, but there's a clause about if you're declared incompetent. All assets transfer to his control immediately. Yes. Her voice was hollow. Mom, whatever you do, don't sign anything. Not on your birthday. Not ever. I reached across the table and placed my hand on her arm. Sweetheart, I have no intention of signing anything. I squeezed once, then let go. But I think it's time Marcus learned that this old woman still has a few surprises left. My 69th birthday arrived on a cool mid-March morning. The kind of day that starts with pale sunshine and the promise of spring after a long winter. Marcus had been planning something for weeks. I'd caught glimpses, hushed phone calls, a new watch hanging in the closet, an appointment written in his calendar for lawyer. 2 p.m. Jennifer's warning echoed in my mind. Don't sign anything. That evening, the dining room was decorated with balloons and a banner that read, "Happy birthday, Mom." The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 months ago, at this same table, He'd announced he was freezing my accounts. Now, he was celebrating me. But this wasn't a celebration. This was an ambush. Marcus had invited Raymond and his husband and a man I didn't recognize. Middle-aged, expensive suit, briefcase. He introduced himself as Stephen Bradford, an estate attorney. I thought it would be nice to have a family dinner, Marcus said, his smile bright and brittle. And since we're all together, I had an idea for a birthday present, something practical. He nodded to Bradford, who opened his briefcase and produced a stack of documents. The top page read, Revocable Living Trust Agreement. This is something Jennifer and I have been discussing, Marcus continued. A way to simplify things for the future. It ensures the house and your other assets transfer smoothly to family without the hassle of probate. He slid the document toward me with a pen. I didn't touch either. That's very thoughtful, I said slowly. May I read it first? Of course, his smile didn't waver. Take your time. So, I did. I read every page out loud, pausing to ask Bradford questions about specific clauses. His answers were professional but guarded. I reached page 7, section 4.2, Incapacity Provisions. This is interesting, I said, keeping my voice casual. It says here that in the event I'm deemed mentally incapacitated, all assets immediately transfer to Let Me See. Marcus Mitchell as sole trustee. I looked up. Not Jennifer, just Marcus. The room went quiet. That's standard language, Bradford said quickly. It's just a safeguard. A safeguard that would let him control everything the moment a doctor signs a paper saying I'm confused. I set down the document. Tell me, Mr. Bradford, did Marcus mention that he already tried to have me declared incompetent or that a social worker found me fully mentally competent just 2 months ago? Bradford's professional composure cracked slightly. He glanced at Marcus. Mom. Marcus's voice had lost its honey. This is just estate planning. There's no need to be paranoid. I appreciate the concern for my estate, Marcus, but I'll have to decline. I pushed the document back across the table. My attorney has advised me not to sign anything without her review. Your attorney? His eyes narrowed. What attorney? Patricia Reynolds. Specializes in elder law and financial crimes. Perhaps you've heard of her. I watched his face go through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, calculation, and finally a flicker of something that looked very much like fear. I didn't know you had an attorney, he said carefully. There are many things you don't know about me, Marcus. I smiled. For instance, you don't know that I've been keeping detailed records of every financial transaction in this household for the past 3 years. You don't know that I have copies of documents you thought were safely filed away, and you don't know that tomorrow morning a civil lawsuit will be filed against you in Maricopa County Court. The color drained from his face, visibly drained. I could see it happening like watching water flow out of a sink. His hands gripped the edge of the table. What are you talking about? $47,300. That's the amount my forensic accountant has documented as misappropriated from my accounts over the past 18 months, plus interest and legal fees. I paused. I suppose I should thank you for the birthday party. It's given me a chance to serve you notice in person. Jennifer sat frozen in her chair, looking like she might be sick. Raymond's mouth hung open. Bradford was already packing his briefcase, clearly wanting no part of whatever was happening. Marcus recovered faster than I expected. His face hardened into something cold and determined. You're delusional, he said, his voice flat. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your mind is going, and you're lashing out at the people trying to help you. We'll let the court decide whose mind is going. I stood up from the table. Thank you for the birthday dinner, Marcus. It's been memorable. I walked up to my room, leaving chaos behind me. Through the floor, I could hear Marcus's voice rising, demanding explanations, making accusations. Jennifer's voice pleading. The lawsuit was already filed. Reynolds had delivered the papers that afternoon. By morning, Marcus Mitchell would officially be a defendant. The next day, I watched from my window as the mail carrier approached, watched Marcus intercept the mail, as he always did, watched him open an envelope addressed to him. Even from a distance, I could see his hands shake as he read. The counterattack came faster than I expected. Within a week of receiving the lawsuit, Marcus had hired his own attorney, a man named Victor Sloan, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics and questionable ethics. They filed a response that made my blood boil when Reynolds showed it to me. "He's claiming harassment," Reynolds said, flipping through the pages. "Says, you've been creating a hostile living environment, following him around the house, making threatening comments, deliberately trying to provoke him. I've barely spoken to him in weeks. He's also filed a motion to have you declared mentally incompetent." She pulled out another document. "He's using Raymond as his primary witness. Statements about your confusion, your memory lapses, your irrational behavior. That social worker already determined I was competent. He's arguing that was months ago and your condition has deteriorated rapidly." Reynolds looked at me over the papers. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need to be honest with you. This is going to get ugly before it gets better." She was right. The competency hearing was scheduled for early April. I spent 2 days being examined by court-appointed psychologists and geriatric specialists. They asked me questions, gave me puzzles to solve, watched me walk and talk and remember. In the end, their report was unequivocal. Barbara Mitchell showed no signs of cognitive impairment. Her memory was excellent. Her reasoning was sound. She was fully capable of managing her own affairs. The judge dismissed Marcus's motion for incompetency in less than 15 minutes. I watched his face as the judge read the ruling. The mask he'd worn so carefully for years was cracking. His jaw tightened, his fingers clenched and unclenched. When he looked at me, there was pure hatred in his eyes. But Marcus wasn't finished. If he couldn't win in court, he'd try to win in public opinion. 2 weeks after the hearing, I received a phone call from a woman named Amanda Pierce, a reporter from a local Phoenix newspaper. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm writing a story about elder abuse in families. Your son-in-law reached out to us with some interesting claims." "What kind of claims?" "He says you've been terrorizing him, that you've become paranoid and aggressive, and that he and your daughter have been living in fear. He's painting himself as the victim of an elderly mother-in-law who's lost a grip on reality." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Ms. Pierce, did he happen to mention that I spent 30 years as a senior auditor for the IRS? That my entire career was built on catching people who lie for money?" There was a pause. "No, he didn't mention that." "Did he mention the lawsuit I filed against him for financial exploitation, or the forged power of attorney, or the $47,000 that's disappeared from my accounts?" Another pause, longer this time. "No. I'll tell you what, Ms. Pierce. If you're interested in a story about elder abuse, I've got one for you. But the abuser isn't who you think it is." We talked for over an hour. I told her everything. The Thanksgiving announcement, the forged signature, the bank trap, the lawsuit. I gave her David Chen's contact information and Reynolds's office number. I told her about Dorothy Hayes, the elderly woman who died after Marcus managed her finances. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Mrs. Mitchell," Pierce said finally, "would you be willing to go on the record with all of this? I've been waiting for someone to ask." The story didn't run immediately. Pierce was a good journalist. She wanted to verify everything, talk to other sources, build a complete picture. But she called me 3 weeks later with news that changed everything. "I found 2 more people," she said. 2 more elderly clients Marcus worked with before he married your daughter. Both of them lost significant money. Both were told it was investment losses or management fees. Both were too embarrassed to press charges. Are they willing to talk? One is Dorothy Hayes' daughter, Margaret. Lost over $60,000 from her mother's estate. She thought she was the only one. When I told her about you and the others, she started crying. Pierce paused. The other is George Sullivan, 69. He lost nearly $80,000. His son convinced him to speak to me. 3 victims, 3 separate cases, a pattern of behavior spanning almost a decade. Marcus wasn't just a thief. He was a serial predator who'd made a career out of stealing from the elderly. I called Reynolds that evening. "We need to talk to the district attorney," I said. "This isn't just a civil matter anymore." "Already on it," she replied. "I've been in touch with the DA's office. With multiple victims willing to testify and documented evidence of ongoing fraud, they're interested, very interested." The investigation would take time. Building a criminal case is slower than building a civil one, but the wheels were turning, and Marcus still had no idea how bad it was about to get. The case against Marcus built faster than I'd expected. Amanda Pierce's article ran in early May, and within a week, 2 more victims had come forward. Dorothy Hayes's estate, represented by her daughter Margaret, had lost $62,000 over 2 years. George Sullivan, 69, and confined to a wheelchair after a stroke, had lost nearly $80,000. Both of them had the same story. Marcus had been charming, helpful, trustworthy until he wasn't. The Arizona District Attorney's Office opened a formal investigation. Detectives interviewed all of us, reviewed bank records, traced money transfers across multiple accounts and institutions. David Chen's work proved invaluable. He'd already documented the patterns that prosecutors needed to see, saved them weeks of investigation. By late May, the DA was ready to move forward with criminal charges. But before that could happen, I had one more card to play. Reynolds had worked out an arrangement with the prosecutor's office. If Jennifer agreed to testify against her husband, providing inside knowledge about the schemes, the forgeries, the planned escalation, she would receive immunity from prosecution for any role she'd played. It wasn't a free pass. She'd still have to face me, and that was its own kind of punishment, but it would keep her out of prison. I met my daughter at the same coffee shop where we'd talked before. This time she looked different, still exhausted, still haunted by what she'd allowed to happen. But there was something new in her eyes. Determination maybe, or the first stirrings of courage she should have shown years ago. "They want me to testify," she said, wrapping her hands around a coffee cup that had gone cold. Reynolds called, said if I cooperate fully, I won't be charged. "I know. I suggested it." She looked at me, surprised, breaking through her exhaustion. "You did. You're my daughter, Jennifer. I'm furious at you, and I'm not sure I'll ever fully trust you again. But you're still my daughter." I paused, letting the weight of that settle. "The question is, are you ready to tell the truth? All of it. No more hiding. No more pretending you didn't see what was happening." She was quiet for a long moment. The coffee shop hummed around us. Conversations. The hiss of an espresso machine. Normal life continuing while ours hung in the balance. Then she nodded. "I knew about the power of attorney. I knew the signature was forged. He practiced it at our kitchen table night after night. And I pretended I didn't see. I knew he was moving money around, taking more than he should have, creating false expenses." Her voice cracked. "I knew, Mom, and I didn't stop him because I was weak. Because he made me feel like I was nothing without him, like I couldn't survive on my own. And now I want to make it right. Whatever it takes." 2 days later, Jennifer gave her formal statement to the district attorney. She confessed everything. The forged documents, the systematic financial manipulation, the long-term plan to eventually declare me incompetent and seize the house. She also revealed something I hadn't known. Raymond had been actively involved from the beginning, making phone calls to set up the fake social worker visit, spreading rumors about my memory problems to build a paper trail for the incompetency claim. The arrest warrants were issued that same afternoon. I wasn't there when they took Marcus. I heard about it later from Reynolds, who'd gotten details from contacts in the police department. 2 officers arrived at the house, my house, around 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. Marcus answered the door in his workout clothes, probably expecting a package delivery. According to Reynolds, he didn't believe it at first, kept insisting there had been a mistake, demanding to call his lawyer, threatening to sue everyone involved for harassment. It wasn't until the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists that the reality finally hit him. Raymond was arrested at his own home an hour later. He went quietly, apparently too shocked to resist. The bail hearing was held the next morning. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom with Reynolds beside me, watching the man who tried to steal my life savings stand before a judge in an orange jumpsuit. The prosecutor laid out the charges: financial exploitation of 3 elderly adults, felony forgery, bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, total documented losses exceeding $190,000. Bail was set at $250,000. Marcus's face went gray when he heard the number. He didn't have that kind of money. Not anymore. His assets had been frozen pending the investigation. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. As the bailiff moved to escort him out, Marcus spotted Jennifer in the courtroom. Their eyes met across the room. Whatever composure he'd maintained shattered completely. He lunged toward the railing, guards grabbing his arms. "You did this. You betrayed me. After everything I did for us, everything I sacrificed." Jennifer stood her ground, pale, shaking, but standing. "You ruined everything," Marcus screamed. His voice echoed off the courtroom walls. "I will make you pay for this. Do you hear me? I will destroy you." The guards dragged him toward the door. He twisted in their grip, his eyes wild, finally finding me in the back row. "And you?" He spat the words like poison. "You think you've won, old woman? This isn't over. This will never be over." I met his gaze calmly. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. "Actually, Marcus," I said quietly, "I think it is." The door closed behind him. The courtroom fell silent. Jennifer walked over to where I sat. Her hands were trembling. "Mom," her voice broke. "I'm so sorry for all of it." I looked at my daughter, the girl who'd let me down. The woman who'd finally found her spine. "I know you are, sweetheart. I know." The trial lasted 3 weeks. By the end, there was no doubt about the outcome. The prosecution presented a devastating case. Bank records showed systematic theft over nearly a decade across multiple victims. Expert witnesses testified about the forged signatures, demonstrating how they differed from my authentic signature. Margaret Hayes, representing her late mother's estate, broke down on the stand, describing how Marcus had befriended Dorothy at a community center, offered to help manage her investments, and slowly drained her life savings while smiling at her every week. George Sullivan gave his testimony from a wheelchair, his voice steady despite the emotion visible on his face. His son sat behind him, tears streaming down his cheeks as George described losing $80,000, money he'd saved for his grandchildren's education. And Jennifer testified. She answered every question the prosecutor asked, admitted every failure and every moment of willful blindness, held nothing back. When the defense attorney tried to paint her as unreliable, Jennifer looked directly at the jury and said, "I was a coward who let my husband steal from my mother. I'm done being a coward." It was, in its way, the bravest thing I'd ever seen her do. Marcus's defense tried every angle. They claimed he was simply a poor financial manager, not a criminal. They suggested his victims were confused, unreliable, perhaps suffering from memory issues themselves. They argued that Jennifer's testimony was tainted by her own guilt, that she was trying to save herself by sacrificing her husband. None of it worked. The evidence was too clear, the pattern too obvious. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, Marcus sat motionless at the defense table. His face was blank, empty, like someone had switched off a light behind his eyes. The confident man who'd once controlled every room he entered had finally run out of moves. Then came the sentencing. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Morrison, reviewed Marcus's history. No prior convictions, but 3 documented patterns of elderly financial exploitation. Combined losses exceeding $230,000. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge said, looking directly at Marcus, "what you've done represents a fundamental betrayal of trust. You targeted vulnerable people, elderly individuals who believed you were helping them, and you systematically stole from them. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated, ongoing pattern of predatory behavior. Marcus stared straight ahead, expression frozen, offering no response. For the charge of financial exploitation of elderly adults, I sentence you to 6 years. For forgery, 3 years to be served consecutively. For bank fraud, 2 years concurrent. She paused to let the numbers sink in. Total sentence, 8 years, with eligibility for parole after 4 years served. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution totaling $232,000. Marcus's shoulders slumped forward, his head dropped. The polished, confident man who'd announced at my Thanksgiving table that he was in control of my finances, he was gone. In his place sat someone small, defeated, broken by the weight of his own crimes finally catching up to him. Raymond, charged as an accessory, received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service. He'd cooperated once he realized how deep his brother's schemes ran. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with Jennifer. The late summer sun was warm on my face. Birds sang in the trees lining the street. Life continued even after everything. What happens now? Jennifer asked quietly. Now we move forward. I looked at her. I'm selling the house. She blinked in surprise. What? Too many memories. Not all of them good. I shrugged. I'm thinking about a condo downtown near the restaurants I like. Somewhere without a master bedroom that someone else claimed as his. Jennifer was silent for a long moment. Then I filed for divorce. Papers went through last week. I know. I'm looking for an apartment. I need to figure out who I am without him telling me who to be. That's probably a good idea. She turned to face me fully. Mom, I don't know how to make this right. What I let happen, what I was part of. I was a coward. I failed you in every way a daughter can fail her mother. Yes, you did. I didn't soften it. She needed to hear the truth without cushioning. But you also stood up when it mattered. You told the truth when lying would have been easier. I paused. That doesn't erase what you did, but it's a start. Can we ever be okay again? I thought about it. About all the years we'd lost. About the girl who used to grip my hand learning to ride a bike. About the woman who'd finally found the courage to be honest. Come to dinner, I said finally. Next month. Thanksgiving. Her eyes widened with surprise. Really? Just the two of us? No guests, no surprises, no documents to sign. I almost smiled. I'll make the turkey. You bring the pie. Thanksgiving arrived on a cool, clear morning. I'd moved into my new condo by then, a 2-bedroom place overlooking downtown Phoenix. The kitchen was smaller than my old one, but it felt more like mine. Jennifer showed up at noon, carrying a pecan pie and a bottle of wine. She looked better than she had in months, still carrying the weight of everything that had happened. But there was life in her eyes again. We cooked together, made the stuffing from my husband's recipe, roasted the turkey until the skin was golden brown. When we sat down to eat, just the two of us at a small table by the window, I poured 2 glasses of wine. A year ago, I said, your husband stood up at my Thanksgiving table and announced he was taking control of my finances. Everyone applauded. I raised my glass. A lot has changed. Jennifer lifted her glass, meeting my eyes. To justice, I said, and to second chances. We drank. Outside, Phoenix spread out below us, lights flickering on as evening approached. It wasn't the same as before. It never would be, but it was honest. It was real. And for the first time in a very long time, it felt like family. If you like this story, subscribe to our new channel, Cold Revenge, as this one will soon cease to exist. You can find a link to the new channel in the collaboration section of this video in the description or in the comments. Subscribe so you don't lose us and can continue listening to interesting stories about revenge. Thank you for your attention.